Dante will see a former pope here, Adrian V, and again, it's not surprising. Dante will put popes in both Inferno as well as in Purgatory here, obviously. Canto 20, still the fifth terrace of Avaricious and Prodigal. Dante will speak with Hugues Capet, the king of France. They talk politics in Canto 20. We got all kinds of examples of avarice. Crassus ruled with Julius Caesar and Pompey, and the enemies poured the gold down his throat. You'll maybe remember that story. And then all of a sudden in Canto 20 we got this huge earthquake. Now we're going to find out about this earthquake anytime a penitent finally makes it up to the top of the mountain and he gets to leave, the mountain will shake. We're going to find this out though because we're going to meet in Canto 21 now, and we're still in the fifth terrace, Avaricious and Prodigal. We're going to meet Statius, and Statius is going to be an important figure for us now moving forward. He will explain again why the mountain shook, and he will in fact say, I'm the one that's being relieved here. And then when he finds out that it's Virgil, he worships Virgil, right? At first he doesn't know that he's talking to Virgil. It's quite a remarkable moment. Canto 22, we move to the sixth terrace and the gluttons. Here, there are three of them, right? Dante, Virgil, Statius. And they talk poetry. They talk about the power of poetry and art and Christianity. And then they find a talking tree that will cite examples of temperance. Obviously, we're with the gluttonous, the opposite of gluttony, right? Talks about Daniel refusing food and drink, John the Baptist in the wilderness as well. Canto 23, still with the gluttons, they meet a group of very, very skinny people, even though they're shades, they're still skinny. And Dante will speak with Donati Farisi about the political predictions about Florence. And for example, he will say that the women, many of the wealthy women of Florence walk around bare-chested, and that all of this is coming to an end and will be punished, right? Okay, the conservative side of Dante. Canto 24, we're still in the same terrace of the gluttons. Dante will meet a fellow poet, and Luca, and they complement each other. And then another tree is seen. This one is related to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil from Genesis 3. They meet an angel, the angel of temperance, which glows red and praises those who use moderation when eating. Canto 25, we move to the seventh terrace, the lustful. It's 2 o'clock roughly in the afternoon, and we are now finally to the last terrace, the lustful. Dante asks Virgil a question. He will dissuade to Statius, and the question is about souls and about the whole notion of why it is that a soul can get thinner, skinnier. The reason why Virgil will demur to Statius is because Dante is about to have Virgil leave in about 5 more cantos, and so we're wanting to set ourselves up to it. Statius will explain the birth of the soul into the body. This is some compelling stuff. I wish I had more time and go into it. It's remarkable stuff, and it fits very well with our study of Plato's Phaedo. So I hope you can do some of that study on your own. They meet here finally a wall of flame, and Virgil will warn Dante, don't look at the flame. There are people walking in the flames, of course, being purged of their lust. Canto 26, still in the same terrace. Dante will see 2 groups walking in the flames. He will speak with Giulice about poetry, so we'll have several times that Dante gets to have conversations about poetry and art. And then in Canto 27, still with the lustful, Dante will meet the last angel, the angel of chastity. And she will say, of course, the angel will say, you must go through the fire to move on. Virgil will have to remind Dante of what's on the other side. And he will remind Dante, hey, do you remember when you rode on the Charon's back in the Inferno? In other words, overcome your fear, if you will. Dante promises Beatrice is on the other side, the Scooby snack of all Scooby snacks, and that will allow for Dante to get through. Once they get through, they rest after the fire, and one more dream. Interestingly, the dream of Leah and Rachel, Jacob's wives, and all of that. The notion that you have to sometimes go through a whole long time period to get the thing you want. Of course, Jacob wanted his Rachel and had to go, through the marriage of Leah and all of that. Of course, that's significant because that will provide in Christian theology that whole notion of the 12 tribes that are derived from Jewish theology, right? They climb, Virgil tells Dante, in a pivotal key moment in Canto 27. It's some of the last words that Virgil will really speak directly to Dante, and he will say, I'm really proud of you. And I guess I would say often the same. I mean, if it's young students, if you're actually trying to go through all this reading and this study, I can't help but say it out loud. I'm proud of you for trying. It's not an easy thing to do. And Virgil will say the same. Finally, Canto 28, we are ready for the earthly paradise. Dante will explore the forest of the earthly paradise, see two rivers and this beautiful singing girl. Later we'll know that it is Matilda. Lethe, the river Lethe, power to forget, and then the power, the river the power to remember only the good stuff in your life. Both of these will play a role, obviously, for Dante in a second. By the way, great line, quote, "Here is the place all poets dream of," end quote. That is to say, innocence. Canto 29, still in the earthly paradise. The girl will sing. Dante follows her, sees a bright light. He sees these seven-branched candelabra. All of this is, of course, important symbolism. Virgil is also stunned and can't speak. Dante sees people dressed all in white. You've got the 24 elders. You've got 4 animals. You've got a chariot drawn by a griffin. You've got a woman who is, you got women who are dancing. 7 men. The first is Luke. I mean, all of this stuff is, and then all of a sudden there's thunder. So in other words, this is kind of like a theophany, as we've sometimes called it, like in the book of Job in the Old Testament of the Bible, where you've got this theophany that's about to happen, some kind of appearance of major divinity and all of that. We come to Canto 30. Canto 30 is, without question, one of the most important moments in all of medieval literature. So many things going on at the same time. We got lots of singing. Out of the cloud of falling flowers, Beatrice appears. Now, we've been waiting for this for a really long time. I'll just read you some lines. "No sooner on my vision straining smote the heavenly influence which years past and even in childhood thrilled me." Beatrice, he saw her a few times when she was young and in Dante's youth. "Then towards Virgil I turned me to leftward." I turned to the left to find Virgil. "Panting, like a babe that flees for refuge to his mother's breast, if aught have terrified or worked him woe." And he says, so I turned, I looked to find Virgil, kind of like it's an interesting simile, kind of like a child who needs to run to his mother for some kind of comfort. "And would have cried," he says, "I would have said out loud," quote, "there is no dram of blood that doth not quiver in me. The old flame throws out clear tokens of reviving fire," end quote. Now, the astute reader, even one or two of you smiling, because these are, of course, lines that we talked about when we did Virgil's Aeneid. You'll remember, this is exactly, these lines, exactly. The old fire burns. Some of you smiling because you remembered laughing about this with us. Yes, these are the lines when Dido saw Aeneas for the first time and made the observation, she's ready now to forget about her husband and ready to move on. It's interesting that Dante, the poet, would put these lines here as the lines that that Dante will want to speak to Virgil. But Virgil had bereaved us, left us of himself. Virgil, my best loved father, Virgil, he to whom I gave me up for safety, nor all our prime mother lost, avail to save my undue cheeks from blur of soiling tears. He turns leftward to find Virgil, to quote the very lines that Dido will have said about seeing Aeneas, and Virgil's gone. And in this moment, this is it. It's amazing. Dante doesn't do any kind of celebration of this or anything. This is it. These are the only lines. And then Dante, the only time his name gets used in the entire Divine Comedy. This is why I think it's important that you read Purgatory, because this is really the heart of the poem. In some ways, we are right in the middle of the poem of the Divine Comedy. And the only time Dante's name gets used, and of course, it's going to be Beatrice. And what is it that Beatrice says? Very first words, Dante, weep not that Virgil leaves thee, nay, weep thou not yet. Key word, yet, right? Behooves thee feel the edge of other sword, and thou shalt weep for that. In other words, hey, do you remember when you were a kid and your parents said something like, no, you better stop crying or I'll give you some reason to cry? This is exactly what she says. She says to him, don't cry, because I got some things I'm going to show you and I'm going to tell you that will make you cry. Oh, we got another sword coming, right? This is that notion there's a mountain yet higher left to climb and all of that Virgil gave to Dante down in Inferno. You'll remember that set of lines. So we're playing the exact same game here. Quite remarkable. Beatrice will then suggest that there's something wrong with Dante. With all that talent, she says, it's all been wasted. It's all been somehow misguided, right? And Beatrice will, in fact, speak to the angels, not to Dante, about what's wrong with Dante. And she'll make observations about how is it possible that, that you could have so easily lost your way, for example. Here I was, this beautiful woman, and you were so in love with my beauty, and then I died. Should have taught you something. Should have taught you something. Why didn't you learn it? Kind of like what we said about our study of the Scrooge story. How is it that it takes Scrooge so long to figure out all that money ain't going to get him any kind of joy, peace at the end of his life? He's ready to give it all up the moment he sees his tombstone. As we have said many, many times, we swing at the park, but the van is always waiting. Right? The only difference between you and a fly is you know about fly swatters. The van is always waiting. You got to go to the van. You ain't met no 200-year-old people. How could it have taken you so long to figure all this out? Right? She says it. We had to use Virgil so we could save you. Right? And obviously, Virgil has done his job, and of course, Beatrice has done her job, and of course, then Dante will do his job of showing that, in fact, he is ashamed. He is broken, and yet in the moment of being broken, he is about to be resurrected. Canto 31, now to finish with our last three cantos. Still in earthly paradise, Beatrice will turn to Dante and commands him to speak. But Dante can't speak. This is one of those interesting moments when a poet's got no words. And he admits then to all of the distractions after Beatrice's death. And then Beatrice will say that confession is in fact the thing she is waiting for and is in fact healthy. Remorseful goes shot sudden through me. Each thing else the more, its love had late beguiled me. Now the more was loathsome. On my heart so keenly smote the bitter consciousness that on the ground overpowered I fell. And what my state was then, she knows who was the cause. When now my strength flowed back, returning outward from the heart. Right? And then Matilda will arrive. This is powerful because in this moment Matilda will take him to Lethe so that he can forget. And he's led to Beatrice. He looks in her eyes and it's as if he's hypnotized. Canto 32, Beatrice is amazing. He's blinded by her beauty. They go to the tree of knowledge. There are no leaves. And then we get this very interesting vision sequence that's going to happen. I'm not going to get into a lot of this, but it's fascinating study. Do it on your own. It's quite remarkable. All of a sudden the tree will bloom after the griffin will help it. Dante will sleep. He awakes. He finds Beatrice sitting beneath a tree. And then Beatrice will give him his mission, which will explain why we've been reading the Divine Comedy. Record what you see. Help a blind world, in other words. Dante will then see foxes, he'll see eagles, he'll see Beatrice and the chariot. A dragon will crush the chariot representative of the church and all the terrible things that happened to the church. The eagle, of course, Rome, and the golden leaves or feathers, the way that gold has ruined the church. The chariot will sprout 3 heads. The chariot will turn into a whore with a jealous giant, and then the giant will drag off the tree the whore. I mean, all of these are powerful images. Ostensibly, put it in your notes this way, because we're not going to go into a lot of detail here. The symbolism is powerful, but what Dante is saying is the church has serious problems. This is, of course, part of that notion of reform. I mean, think about this. Here we are, 1300. It'll be 200 years later that Martin Luther will be making some similar kinds of accusations towards the church, which will, of course, begin a protest movement that we've spoken of many times. Canto, finally, 33. At the very end of the poem, we will then have this powerful call of Beatrice. She calls Dante brother. She asks him if he has any questions, and Dante will ask for guidance. She will say, disentangle yourself from fear and shame. Take heed. And as these words by me are uttered, teach them even so to those who live, that life, which is a race to death, And when thou writest them, keep in mind not to conceal how thou hast seen the plant that twice hath now been spoiled. First by the eagle, and then of course by the giant, right? Beatus will then interpret all that Dante just witnessed. That is to say, God's reasoning is transcendent to man's reasoning. Then Matilda will take Dante, bathe him in the river you know, and he will return to Beatus, remade, resurrected. The phoenix myth comes to mind, and now he is ready for his trip to paradise, heaven. Well, let's give some quick final thoughts here. Of course, let's put it in our notes. 3 things. Dante obviously is learning, he's evolving, he's growing. This is the powerful symbolism. Dante himself, the pilgrim, a powerful symbol of what it means to go through the fire, quite literally, right? And he has to leave Virgil. He leaves behind Virgil, or Virgil will leave him, and he moves on now with Beatrice. Again, let's say number 2, this text is clearly didactic, instructional. Propedeutic is the term we've used, right? And the challenge is what? Perspicacity, insight. We have 2 kinds of sight, don't we? Outside, I can see you. Insight, not that I roll my head into my eyes in the back of my head and see my brain. No. Insight, that is to say, I figure stuff out. I wake up, don't just grow up. We're thinking, of course, about Plato's Republic and Cave allegory, book 7 and all of that, right? The question is a 3P question. Are we growing? Are we evolving? At this point in our AP study, we hope that, of course, you can begin to say, I'm starting to see some big picture stuff going on here. Finally, number 3, well, now it is, but we are ready to move on to that final of the canticles, paradise. And we have a problem. How do you describe something that is beyond description? Translinguistic is our word. Well, Dante is the great poet. T.S. Eliot called him the greatest poet for a reason, right? We'll get to the 3rd part of the poem, and we'll see how Dante actually one-ups himself or two-ups himself in the final canticle. I hope you'll come back for that study as well. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun.